They just don't yet possess the cognitive ability or the cognitive development to see that how they behave, they have to take into account other people's feelings and other people's perspectives and other people's, situations also. So, being that they are completely self-centered and self-absorbed, they are learning to expand that viewpoint to also include other people, and so they start thinking about how this might make little Johnny feel if I don't share my toys, even though me personally, I might want to hoard everything and keep everything for myself. Little Johnny over here, he doesn't have anything to play with, so maybe I could share with him so that he also gets some enjoyment from this birthday party or whatever. So that this egocentric behavior that they have, where they are only focusing or thinking about themselves, that's very, very common in this stage. Children in this stage may even credit inanimate objects with life and lifelike properties. This is called animism. This is when their stuffed animals get lonely when they go off to school. Things like that. So they might set them up in little prearranged scenarios. They might set all of their stuffed animals up at their little tea party set so that they can have tea while they're gone, etc. So they don't get bored or lonely while the child is not there. Pre-operational thought is also very intuitive, lacking in logic. They're not the sharpest tools in the shed. 4-year-olds don't really think through things in a prescribed, orderly manner. It's very, very intuitive. They tend to go with their gut. They don't use a whole lot of logic, and that's not surprising. That this is not a very advanced stage of development. So intuitive reasoning is very, very, very common in this stage. All right, so concrete operational. This is Piaget's third stage. This occurs from about 7 to around 11. Thought in this stage becomes operational, and intuitive reasoning is replaced by logical reasoning. So this is they make that hallmark, they make that jump to where they're able to kind of process things very rudimentarily, but it's not nearly as developed or advanced. That's not really a good way to put it. They tend to see a little bit more order in things. They can start to view the consequences of their actions. If they do this, they might have gotten in trouble for it before. So if they do it again, they'll probably get in trouble for it again. But if they change some small aspect of their behavior, maybe mom won't notice and I might just get away with it. I took a chocolate chip cookie last time, got in trouble for it, but I didn't take the oatmeal, or I didn't take the peanut butter, or I didn't take the brownie. So the brownie or the peanut butter, she didn't say I couldn't eat that, so maybe that might work as well. So it's a lot of trial and error. They kind of push the boundaries, and so you'll notice 9 and 10 and 12-year-olds will test your boundaries a lot, and they are learning what they can get away with, and they're learning this concrete, rational. It's not yet really logical, but it can be very, very rudimentary. They're starting to think about the future. They're starting to be able to process that, hey, this what I do now might have an effect later on, and that's a very, very important hallmark. And all of this concrete, this very rudimentary, this very base level reasoning, logical reasoning, if you want to even call it that, this doesn't translate to abstractions. They have to actually, it's a lot of trial and error, and they're obviously trying a whole bunch of different scenarios, and they're learning what works and what doesn't work for almost anything. Not only what they can get away with without getting in trouble, but also what might benefit potential rewards or things like that. But everything is kind of a trial and error. They see something, they want it, they try for it, they don't get it, they might readjust and try for something else. But they have learned that one-to-one correlations between this behavior and this consequence, that will stick. And then we move into the formal operational. This is the final stage of Piaget. Once you get to formal operational, Piaget said you're at the highest. You're good to go for adulthood. This occurs. The onset's usually somewhere between 11 to 15, and this occurs. We stay in this stage throughout adulthood. Thought in this stage is more abstract, idealistic, and logical than concrete operational thought. And again, we're able to conceive of these hypothetical possibilities. I usually bring up the example, how many of you would think it would be a good idea to rob a bank with me after class? And you get some people who will raise their hand and some people who won't, because that's a hypothetical possibility. We don't actually have to go rob a bank to be able to decide that that's probably not a smart move. And we probably wouldn't be very good at it. And if we got caught, bad things would happen. We would go to jail, and you can imagine what jail might be like. And so you're constantly kind of weighing these risks versus rewards. And you decide that, the risk of what could potentially happen in this hypothetical possibility or scenario might not be worth the potential rewards of the adrenaline rush or the money or whatever you might get from it. And so you're able to, conceive of these things for which you have no direct experience. You don't have to try it. It's not concrete. You don't have to actually try this and experience the resolution or the result firsthand. You can also learn vicariously. We're going to talk about this in the next chapter when we get to learning. If big brother or big sister tries something, you can watch their response and what happens to them, and you can also kind of adjust your behavior by simply watching them as well. That's not a concrete, that is a formal, operational, hypothetical possibility learning experience. So vicarious learning, vicarious reinforcement, which we're going to talk about in the next chapter, these things are all done during Piaget's later stages. All right, so we're done with Piaget. Okay, so let's talk about attachment. Attachment refers to the close emotional bond and the enduring socio-emotional relationship between an infant and its caregiver. It is called attachment. It is not nurturing. It is not bonding. It is called attachment. One common method for discerning the type of attachment, and again, there are 4 types of attachment. We're going to get to that here in the next slide. But one way that we use to discern or determine, one way we used to really determine the type of attachment is through something called the strange situation. You guys can, I don't really want to go into it on this video. It's kind of long and it's a little bit difficult to explain. There are lots and lots of YouTube videos out there and websites that can describe what this strange situation. Just know that the strange situation is something that we use to determine the type of attachment that an infant has towards its caregiver. Now, as we talk about attachment, keep in mind that it is the infant that is attached to the caregiver. It is not a mark or a reading of the type of parenting. That's going to be later. It is how the child responds to the parent. All right, 4 types of attachment: secure, avoidant, resistant, and disorganized. Come up with some kind of mnemonic or something on your own for that, for the test. Secure attachment, the first time, defines a relationship in which infants have come to trust and depend on their mothers or caregivers. Usually it's the mother, so we're just going to assume that it is mother. A baby may or may not cry when the mother leaves, but when she returns, the baby wants to be with her, and if the baby is crying, it stops. This is all having to do with the strange situation, which again is much easier to explain in person. So you guys can kind of read over this on your own. The second, avoidant attachment, refers to a relationship in which the infant turns away from its mother when they are reunited following a brief separation. Avoidantly attached children usually are very, very lone wolf, very, very solo. They're easy children to raise. They tend to kind of do well on their own. They don't need a lot of intervention. They don't need a lot of help. Secure kids are just exactly what they sound like. They're very very easygoing, very able to transition and change activities with ease. They're very good kids to raise. Avoidant attachment are very easy kids to raise. They don't take a whole lot of effort. They don't need a whole lot of involvement. A lot of parents who have an avoidantly attached child will think that their child doesn't love them, or think that their child doesn't want to be involved with them. And you can kind of transition, if you don't have children, you can kind of transition this to different types of pets. Some pets are good either way, whether you play with them or hug them, or whether you want to chill on the couch or whatever. They're good to go. That's a securely attached pet. Some pets are you may never see them. A lot of cats are avoidantly attached. They don't like you all up in their business, and they don't want you to cuddle with them and all of that. They just would rather just do it themselves and be kind of left alone and be on their own. That's avoidant attachment. Resistant attachment refers to a relationship in which, after a brief separation, infants want to be held but are difficult to console. These are the clingy, whiny babies who can't stand to be more than 3 feet from mom at all times. They tend to get very scared. They're usually quite they don't branch out on their own. They don't take a whole lot of risk, and we all know people like this who don't want to venture out, don't want to venture too far away from shore or the safety of mama's skirt. You can think of resistant attached pet, is the dog who's always following you to the bathroom and things like that, and whines and barks every time you leave the house for 5 seconds to go get the mail or whatever. Just does not want to be out of your sight or away from your side. Kind of a little bit more difficult to deal with. And then we have disorganized or disoriented attachment. This refers to a relationship in which the infants don't seem to really understand what's happening when they are separated and later reunited with their mothers. This is a very, very rare type of attachment. We don't see it a whole lot in many children. It's very difficult to describe. It usually happens more with children with on the autism spectrum, who don't really understand personal relationships or really have very little need for them altogether. And so they may be so hyper-focused on a task that they're doing or whatever that they may not even realize that mom has even left the room entirely. And they'll look up and, after they're done or whatever, and kind of look around and not really understand or get what's going on. So outside of, autism type disorders, we don't see disorganized attachment very often. And again, you guys can do your own research on these things. If this chapter is interesting to you, by all means, take a developmental class. You'll get really, really into all of these types of things. Every once in a while, they'll throw a developmental class my way. This can be kind of an interesting chapter. So if again, feel free to do your research on this and go and check out a lot of these different types of attachment. Look at the strain situation. Mary Ainsworth is the psychologist who's probably best known for this type of work. And you can see all kinds of experiments on children that are probably highly unethical today, but nonetheless, they did happen, and we did learn quite a bit. You can look up Piaget and see all the kinds of stuff that he did. He experimented on his own children and things like that. So a lot of these developmental types of experiments, you can go online and read about and research and watch a bunch of YouTube videos and really get to know exactly where we came from as a science. All right, so moving on from attachment, we're going to move into temperament. Temperament involves an individual behavioral style and characteristic way of responding. Basically, kind of, you can think of temperament as a proto-personality, a kind of a baby-forming developmental personality. Excuse me. There are 3 types, 3 basic, categories of children, if you want to say children's types of personalities. There's the easy child, the difficult child, and the slow to warm up child. The easy child. is generally in a positive mood. They quickly establish regular routines in infancy and they adapt easily to new experiences. These are the gifts from God. The probably the best example of an easy child is that little kid from Jerry Maguire, who just is always smiling and always happy and always go. They don't really cry a whole lot. They don't whine a whole lot. They're not fussy. They're good with whatever. You want to go to the zoo. You want to sit there and watch a movie. You want to read a book, whatever. They're chilling with you. You can put your pet in this category as well. Easy pets who are just whatever you want to do is cool, as long as I'm here with you, then we're good to go. Then we have the difficult child. The difficult child tends to react negatively and cry frequently. They engage in irregular daily routines and they are slow to accept new experiences. This again is exactly what it sounds like. This is a very difficult endeavor. The best example I have for this is the child from The Babadook. If you've never seen that movie, it is a wonderful movie about the persistence of parenting, and it's supposed to be kind of a horror, but it's got so much going on that it's a really good movie. If you've ever seen The Babadook, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That would be the perfect example of a difficult child, one who is never really satisfied or pleased, is very needy, very clingy. But go watch that movie if you haven't yet. You owe it to your life to get that one under your belt. And then we have the slow to warm up child. This one has a low activity level. They are somewhat negative. They show low adaptability and they display a low intensity of mood. These are, I see them as kind of somewhat in between the two, in between the easy and the difficult. It's not really easy, but it's kind of the way opposite extreme of difficult. Difficult or very, very, not really energetic, but very, very needy, very, very high maintenance. Slow to warm up is not. It's almost kind of harkens back to an avoidant type of attachment, where they don't really need much from you and they're kind of almost distant and aloof, and it takes a lot to really get them to engage. A lot of teenagers, I guess, if you want to think about kind of the prototypical teenager who is always in his room or whatever and never really wants to engage with the family or whatever, you can kind of think of that and translate that off to a child. But those are the three types, three main types of temperament. 4 types of parenting: authoritative, authoritarian, neglectful, and indulgent. Get another drink. These are exactly what they sound like. So we're going to I think this video is getting pretty dang long. So we're going to try and roll through these as quickly as we can. Authoritarian parenting is a restrictive, punitive style in which the parent exhorts the child to follow the parent's directions and to value hard work and effort. This is the you do it my way or else, no back talk. I see this type of parent as usually the military dad who, children are meant to be seen and not heard. I am the authority figure and you're going to do it my way, and, whatever. That's authoritarian. Authoritative parenting encourages children to be independent but still places limits and controls on their own behavior. This is the gold standard. This has been shown time and time again to be the best. If there is a best parenting style, authoritative is the one to shoot for. Firm limits and controls. The child knows that there are consequences to their behaviors, but they're not so firm and rigid where there's no give and take. There's no what's a good word for it? There's no leeway. There's no room for error. That's authoritarian, and that's a very, very bad way to raise your children. So if you're doing that, stop. These types of parents are very warm and nurturing. They're loving, but again, they're going to place. There are some limits. There are some rules. There are some chores, but it's not the end all be all of existence. The rules and the discipline and all of that. That again is much more in the authoritarian realm. Neglectful parenting is exactly what it sounds like. Indulgent parenting, again, exactly what it sounds like. Indulgent parents are usually more concerned with being the child's friend or being liked by the child than by raising the child and teaching the child how to be successful in the world. A lot of parents today are turning, I see a lot more indulgent type of parenting. Very few limits, very few restrictions. The child pretty much gets to do whatever they want. Because the parent fears, making the child angry or making the child not love them anymore, which is not the case. Children need rules and structure and discipline, but there is a limit to everything. So with all things, kind of maintain that center road of being warm and nurturing and caregiving, but again, having some rules and some discipline and some consequences. Children need to learn that there are consequences for their behavior. That's very, very important. All right, moral development. Moral development involves changes within age in thoughts, feelings, and behaviors regarding the principles and values that guide what people should do. Moral development is most closely associated with a guy by the name of Lawrence Kohlberg. He was really one of the first guys to kind of attempt to categorize moral reasoning and moral development and where we get our judgments of right from wrong. Research on morality, moral reasoning, and thinking has revolved around a guy by the name of Lawrence Kohlberg. I just kind of talked about that. He began studying moral thinking and by creating these stories and asking children, adolescents, and young adults questions about these stories. So what he would do is he would kind of write out these morally ambiguous types of stories and ask them questions where there's no real clear-cut right or wrong answer. And then he would try to figure out, where these children are, where these people are. And he did it with adults as well, on kind of his scale of development. And we're gonna kind of go over an example here in just a second, but you'll understand that these kind of morally ambiguous, where there's no real clear-cut right or wrong answer. So it can be somewhat difficult to understand the quote-unquote right way or the right answer, and that's really kind of the point. So here's an example. A woman was near death from a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that the doctors thought might save her. It was a form of